Good morning, everyone. How are you doing today? It's me, Ursula. How's it going? Welcome to my studio. I am excited for today. We are going to just be taking it easy, um, keeping it kind of low key, going over some basics. We're going to be doing some basic color mixing today, and we're going to be working with patterns. So when I say pattern, what I mean is repetition of shapes, designs, motifs. That's what I mean by a pattern. Hi, Amanda. Good morning. Great to see you. Thanks for joining today. So to prepare, you will want to have a nice full palette of paints ready because we are going to review color mixing basics. Now, I have you probably can't even really decipher the colors here, but I have some phthalo blue, some phthalo green. This is actually a chromatic orange. It's very similar to this, which is cadmium red light hue. This is cadmium yellow. I have alizarin crimson. I have titanium white. I'm going to need more of that. And then I have some burnt umber. So that's what I have for now, but other colors you might want to have on hand, we're going to talk about black and mixing black. So if you have a tube of black paint, great. If not, we're going to get to that. We're going to talk about different things like neutral colors, just reviewing primary, secondary colors, complementary colors and mixing them, and also ways to layer your paint so you can get some nice effects. And throw in a little work with pattern as well. Hi, Wacker. Good morning. Happy to be here. And it's vaccination day. Oh, fabulous. Good for you. I hope you have a nice place to lay down afterwards and just relax because, yeah. Well, anyway, it's great to have everyone here. So let's go ahead. Let's get started. I'm going to work on a canvas today. Actually, I have this canvas that has some other things on it. So I'm going to just start with a raw, it's not raw, it's just a white canvas. Never really been painted on except for these extraneous marks. I'm going to start with that. Other things you might want to have on hand is like papers with patterns. I have a friend that just gave me these really beautiful like origami papers. So I may work with these and scissors, anything like that. And you could do this today on paper as well instead of canvas. I'm also going to play with a stencil at some point. We'll just see what happens. We'll see what unfolds. So let's go ahead and get started. We're going to start today with mixing black. I'm going to start with that right out of the gate. So there's a term called chromatic black. And what that means is when you mix a black or a dark value, as opposed to a pigmented black. Hey, Jamie. Good to see you. So we're going to, if you have black in a tube, like this is Mars black, if you have some kind of black in a tube, great, let's use it. And then let's also mix our own black so you can see how to do that. So basically, when you mix your own black, my suggestion is that you take your three darkest colors. Generally, for me, that's my phthalo blue, my alizarin crimson, and my burnt umber. But other dark colors you might have on hand, like this phthalo green is pretty dark. I'll just go ahead and throw that in the mix. And then mix them together. Now this is looking a little on the blue side, and that's okay. I'm just going to work with it for a second here and show you. Let's see. Hey, Jen. Awesome to see you. Okay, so I just mixed all those dark colors together, and I have, um, it almost looks like more of a dark blue, like a Prussian blue. But when you look at it in the camera here, it's almost the same value as like my hair or my apron. Um, so sometimes when I talk about black, what I'm referring to is your darkest value that you're capable of producing with your paints. So for now, just go ahead and mix. If you're trying out this chromatic black, mix your 3 or 4 darkest pigments together. I just put a little more burnt umber in my mix here, so it wouldn't appear so blue. And you might see that here. So you can probably see here how there's a little bit of a shift there between those two applications of color. And that kind of vibration is why I like to mix blacks a lot, because you get just very subtle shifts in your dark values. Another combo that's nice to work with is your phthalo green and your alizarin crimson. Just those 2 dark colors. When you mix them together, you get a really nice, rich, dark value as well. So all of these are, different variations of what's called chromatic black. And another thing I like about this is, let's say I go ahead and I paint with a light color on top. I'll get some interesting grays that way. It's nice for a landscape to try this out. It's nice for portraits sometimes to avoid using black out of the tube. Something you might try is making a circle and adding a little light value in there, mixing on your canvas. When you're working with acrylics, often you have to mix on your canvas. You might have already discovered this because the paint dries so quickly sometimes that it's easier to mix your paints right on your canvas rather than mixing them on the palette and then, working with them. Sometimes, not all the time. But yeah, so you see these really nice, rich grays and neutral colors coming up. I'm going to add a little more brown here. If you're ever like trying to make a painting of like stainless steel or something, working with brown and blue is a really nice start to get a nice gray. And then you can add, a little bit of white in there for a highlight. Like, let's pretend this is a stapler or something, or water. That highlight is really important to show reflection. So I'm going to go ahead and actually just blend all this. If your paint's still wet, you can just blend right on the canvas with a soft bristle brush. Some people like a more blended look. If you have black in a tube, let's go ahead and work with that. I usually recommend to people to try adding a little red into their black if you're working with it out of the tube, because it just adds a little bit of vibrancy to the paint. But we'll start, I just took some Mars Black right out of the tube, and I'm just gonna start over here. And you can see it is much darker. I mean, obviously I had already put some white over there. But yeah, it has a different quality to it. So just to compare, I'm gonna go ahead, I'm gonna mix another chromatic, blue, red, and brown here. So you can see the difference. This is blue, red, and brown. I don't even know if you can see a difference that much. It's still a dark value, it's just a little bit bluer. It's hard to see a difference there. But let's go ahead and add, just to see what happens, we'll take some white and mix it into the chromatic side. And just notice the difference there as opposed to adding white to the regular black. So there is a slight difference when you do that. So what might happen is, let's say I'm just going to take black out of the tube and I want to paint a leaf. So I'm going to take black out of the tube, some green and white and yellow just to fill it in. And then what happens is it mixes with that black and then you start to get like gray. You see how that looks gray? That's why I avoid this, especially in my beginning painting classes, because I feel like if you just default to black, you get a lot of gray paintings. I'm going to do the same thing using a fresh brush. I'm using blue, brown, and red to make a dark value. It's actually a little more blue, but let's add some brown to it. Okay, so let's say that's the outline of my leaf. I'm going to take that same yellow and phthalo green that I mixed before and mix it in here. And you see how it's keeping its vibrancy. It's not getting grayed down. It might be getting blued down a little bit, but it's not as dull as when I use the black. So I just wanted to show that because, you know, I often talk about, oh, using black grays down the painting, but hopefully you can see this now in this demonstration, the difference it makes to mix a dark value using pigments rather than using black right out of the tube. So if your paintings are turning out really gray and dull, it might be because you're using too much black paint. And maybe you should switch to working with dark pigments to achieve a dark value. All right, let's keep moving on. Let's keep going with this kind of neutral thing. Actually, I want to show you now, take black out of the tube and mix a little bit of red in it. And actually, I'm going to go ahead and mix this is the cadmium red light. Just a little touch of that into my black. And you'll see it makes, I don't know if it's noticeable on here. This is black right out of the tube. I'm going to work with, there's a little red in there. It's hard to see. I can see it when I look at it. There's a little more warmth to that color. It's hard to see on the painting. So yeah, I will sometimes recommend if you are going to work with black out of the tube, mix red into it. See what happens. Okay, so that's black. You might go ahead and Put a little more gray on your painting here. We're going to be building up things in layers, painting over things, and just experimenting with layering our paint today. So I'm taking a bunch of brown and white here and mixing like a neutral, grayish neutral block of color here. If your palette has like become very dark from all this color mixing, I would suggest you go ahead, either use a new sheet of paper, of palette paper, or wipe off your palette. And let's get into mixing up some secondary colors. So on the color wheel, red, yellow, and blue are considered primary colors. The colors that, when you mix those together, those colors are called secondary colors. So orange is a secondary color. Orange is what you get when you mix yellow and red. So go ahead, grab a scoop of your yellow and just a touch of red. You can use the alizarin or the other kind, it doesn't matter. And you'll get a little bit of orange. And just go ahead and work with that now. Maybe designate a portion of your canvas to just mix up different oranges, also yellow orange, red orange. You might take paint right off of your palette and mix it in there. Maybe add a little water. And just try to get a lot of different oranges. You might even work with your orange that's right out of the tube. Maybe pick up some white and just mix it right in there. Just enjoy the process of mixing up the paints. And like I said, maybe just try mixing right on the canvas and see what happens. Maybe add a little water to your paint. So we're mixing orange. Let's mix up some green. Green is yellow and blue. Now, the thing that's important to learn about green is that it only takes a little bit of blue when you mix them together. I'm going to take this big chunk of yellow and I'm taking that much blue, a tiny, teeny, tiny corner of blue. And you'll see just that little amount really affects the yellow. Because blue is such a dark, strong pigment, you only need a little of it to get some green. And, you know, depending on your pigment, you're going to get a different result. If you're using ultramarine blue, your green might not be as vibrant, it might not be as bright. I think I have a combination here of ultramarine and phthalo. I often do that. I'll mix my blues together. So this is considered a blue-green, and it's very dark. And that's the thing, that's the one word of advice I have. When you use blue, it can really take over your palette and really dominate your painting. So I'm going to come back with some yellow here and just mix on my canvas. Maybe even a little white. I'm going to do these kind of swirly things because it's sort of fun. So when this kind of thing happens, when you get these striations in your brush mark, that's called broken color. And that can add a nice vibrancy to your painting. Some people think they have to mix up their paints perfectly before they apply them. And you can do this sort of thing. This is like what the Impressionists did. It can add a buoyancy also to your paintings. So I'm going to add more yellow here. You will always go through, if you're mixing your colors correctly, you'll always go through your yellow and your white tubes of paint first. You generally need more of those pigments when you're mixing your paints. The dark colors you don't need as much. And then the final color I want us to mix today is purple, which is a combination of red and blue. And depending on your pigments, you're going to get different results for that. My favorite purple that I get is when I take my alizarin crimson. I'm going to just do it right on the canvas. And then when I mix a teeny bit of phthalo blue into it. Again, it's really dark because that blue is really dark, but I'm letting the white of the canvas kind of come through also here, but also take white and just mix it in, and you should get more of a lavender type of a color. So if you go a little heavier with the red, you'll have more of like a red violet, magenta type of a color. Often your purples won't be as purpley as if you were just going to mix them with, or as if you were going to just use a pigment that you already have. So let's see. I have dioxazine purple. It's in a fluid acrylic form, but I'm going to mix this with some white so you can see the difference here. So that's definitely a little more like purple, I guess, in terms of what people think of as a purple color. I often will hear people really bummed out when they mix their blue and their red together and they're not getting the purple that they want. So one thing I like to do is I like to take, let's say, a purple, dioxazine purple that you would get right out of the tube. I like to take that and then mix red or blue into it also. And that's what I did here a little bit. So try that out too. If you have a purple, in the tube. So hopefully you're coming up with some fun, just color blocks like this, some fun, assortments of color using your yellow, red, and blue and white. So just to repeat, we mixed a dark value and grays and blues. We mixed blue, brown, red and white together to get some of these gray areas. This is black right out of the tube. Um, we mixed yellow and red for orange, yellow and blue for green, and red and blue for purple. So some other things you might want to do now is just take whatever. I always love to just take like the paints that are left on my palette and just play around with those also, like yellow especially. Um, I use a lot of yellow in my paintings. Um, I find it like really brightens things up. Um, and I often have a couple of different kinds of yellow. So this is cadmium yellow medium, but then also this is yellow light Hansa, and it's a little more lemony. And I'll just put some here. You can see it's a lot lighter. So yeah, you might just be making these sort of color blocks around your paper or your canvas. Another fun thing I like to do is I like to take my white um, and use whatever's left in my white blob, like if I have little dots of paint in there, and mix them all together for some kind of a neutral thing, a pastel. You might see this up here, and work with that too. Maybe just grab whatever paints are left on your palette, mix them all together. You'll get some kind of, probably some kind of a neutral brownish color. Now, a lot of people refer to this as mud, but I refer to mud as anything that I mix unintentionally, or when my colors are like not vibrant, things are running together. It's more of a common thing in oil painting because your colors stay wet so long on the palette and everything, or on the painting, and everything will blend together too much. That's one thing I would say, like avoid over blending. If you want to keep like a vibrancy to your paintings, avoid like overworking something to death. Like, getting in there and just blending, 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 and then you just sort of, I mean, it's a nice way to create an atmospheric quality in your painting, but also, sometimes if you just over blend, it will also like kind of deaden everything, I think. I mean, there's like a nuance. There's a time and a place for a lot of blending. But I would say like try to keep your marks fresh and your application of paint, a little bit more um, immediate. And if you're going to blend, do it discerningly, I guess. I don't know if that makes any sense. See, I'm kind of blending all this now. Just to see what happens here. So another thing to think about is complementary color sets. When they're mixed together, neutralize each other. So complementary colors are colors that come across from each other on the color wheel. So yellow and purple are always complementary colors. In their most saturated state, when they're next to each other, like right here, there's a really an intense push and pull with them. When you mix them together, they neutralize each other. The saturation, the vibrancy of the paintings becomes a little less, becomes more brown or more gray. So you might notice this if you overlap the two colors, but you can also play around with mixing those complementary sets together. Um, like I'll take some, oops, I got another color in my brush. I'm going through a lot of brushes today. So I'll take some yellow. Actually, let's see what happens if we just paint right over that purple. It gets a little bit browner, a little bit grayer, I guess, when you do that. That's what I mean by neutralizing. This is like bright yellow, more neutral purple, grayish purple, and then you have your purple. So hopefully you get a sense for what I mean by that. But I'll go ahead, here's some yellow. I'm gonna take just a little dot of violet and mix it in. And you see how that's like not as punchy as the yellow or the purple. It's a little browner. So when you mix your colors, when you mix complementary color sets, that's what happens. They neutralize each other. Red and green is another one. That's a really good one to know, especially if you're going to be doing landscapes. All my paints are getting all over the place now. But let's say you use some green, right? And then mix a touch of, this is actually like red orange. But if you mix a touch of that in there, you'll see it makes it more of an olive green. So those neutral colors are really important in a painting. A lot of people love bright colors, but in order for the bright colors to show, you need those grays and those more neutral colors for them to bounce off of. And a good example of that is if you make a drawing using all pencil, let's say. If you add just a little bit of color onto that gray drawing, you'll see it really like bounces out at you. And that's because when put together, you see how this orange is really popping when it's next to that gray. We need neutral colors to see the bright colors. So if you do a painting that's all just like bright yellow, blue, green, sometimes it can be too much, and there's no neutral place for your eye to just rest. A lot of people, like I said, they think of my paintings as being really colorful, like this mixed media piece behind me. But there's a lot of gray in that. All that surrounding area there, that's all gray, light gray, neutral, white. So just, you need those gray and neutral browns and such to make the bright colors really pop. Joseph Albers was a color theorist, and he wrote a book called The Interaction of Color. And he talked about how we can only see color in relationship to the other colors around it. Colors change in relationship to what's around them. And often, people, when they're painting, let's say, a landscape or something, they'll wonder, like, how can I make the tree look more green or brighter? And it might be a matter of changing the colors around it to make the tree brighter. Maybe you got to go a little more neutral in your blue sky. Okay, let's get into patterns. So Okay, one other thing I want to say is like, maybe some pastels. I love pastels also. People tend to work really, really dark and saturated with their colors. Don't be afraid of adding white to your paints to get some lighter tones, especially your blues. Like I see a lot of paintings where people are just dark, dark, dark. So add some white to your blue. I'm gonna paint on top of that so you see that. And really open it up so it's not so dark. Now you see I'm just sort of like overlapping color blocks here. Um, and I'm working with no plan here. I'm just kind of applying my colors. Um, and you might do that today too. You could draw out a design for yourself and fill it in, or just like I'm doing here, layer your colors. Good morning. Finally, I am able to join you. Hi, Charlotte. Thanks for joining. All right, let's do some pattern on here now. So something I like to do is what I call stitching. And that's just something I like to call it. Where you stitch together maybe disparate elements of a painting with a pattern. So I'm going to take my titanium white, and I think for now I'm going to mix a little bit of red into it so I get kind of a pink color. I had kind of like a very light purpley pink color. And I'm going to use that now, and I'm going to impose some kind of pattern over a section of this. Now, in terms of composition, just a fun little thing, the rule of thirds, if you break up your canvas into 3 parts vertically and horizontally, where those lines intersect is a nice place for a focal point. So I'm going to work right here, and I'm going to just see about creating some repetition of marks and sort of visually stitching together an area here. And you might come up with some interesting pattern or just be really loose about it. Now I mixed white. I'm mixing like a pastel like this because this titanium white is opaque. So it's going to cover those other colors a little bit more. So it will pop out, the pattern pops out better. And it is mixing in some cases in with the paint underneath it, but I am happy with that. That doesn't bother me. And you might try a couple of different patterns. If you use a script brush like this, hey Joanne, fun to see you. If you use a script brush like this, I often need to work flatter like that because the paint has to drip off of my brush. One thing I want to show you, I'm going to take some cadmium yellow. I'm taking it right out of the tube. All right, I'm mixing it right out of the tube. Wish you could see my palette here, but like this. I want to show you a common mistake, or it's not really a mistake, but just something people do. Let's say they'll take their red, or their yellow red out of the tube, and they'll start painting on top of like a dark area of color. And, um, it looks pretty, but the problem is that this yellow is really transparent. So when it dries, it will disappear. I mean, you'll still probably see it, but it has a tendency to disappear if you're painting on top of a dark surface with yellow. So if that's happening to you, what I recommend is that you mix a little of your titanium white into your yellow, and that will help the yellow to sit on top of that dark color a little better. So I'm mixing some titanium white into my yellow, and I'm going to go ahead and put some more of these little marks down here. You can see a little bit of a shift there in color, but we'll also observe it as it dries. You may notice that your acrylic paints, as they're drying, they change color. And that's just because they actually get a little more transparent as they dry. So whatever's underneath them shows through more. I'm not sure about oil paints, to be honest. So you can already sort of see it, how these marks are kind of disappearing a little bit. Something I see a lot of artists do is they take a color that's really transparent, like a red. They love it. It looks gorgeous, when it's wet and out of the tube, and they paint it on top of something they want, or they splatter it on top of something, and then it dries and it disappears. And that's because the paint's too transparent. So just if that's happening to you in any situation, like if you made a painting, you finish it up with this bold spray of red, and then it disappears when it dries, it's because it needs a little more of an opaque pigment in it, whether it's white or yellow ochre is a good opaque color to know about. The white Naples yellow also is an off-white. This is a good opaque pigment. It's good to know which pigments are transparent and which ones are opaque. One way to do that is to look at the bottle, and it will say it on it. Here it says opaque. Usually pigments will fall on a spectrum of opacity, but I just know that Naples yellow, yellow ochre, titanium white, raw umber. If you want a dark pigment that's opaque, raw umber, as opposed to burnt umber. Burnt umber is transparent, raw umber is opaque. And you can also just type it into Google, which colors are opaque, which colors are transparent. And you'll probably, I'm sure someone has compiled a list out there. Okay, so let's continue on with some patterns. Wow, this went by quickly. Let me know if you have any questions. I know I covered a lot of ground here with, with all this. But let's see, I'm going to do some lines now, and I'm going to stick with the white, the kind of lighter colors. In the comments of this video, or I'm sorry, in the description of this video, I included a link to Op Art. Op Art was art that created through through lines and such, um, optical illusions were created or are created. And the painting almost seems to move. Um, an artist that was really masterful at that technique, or is, she's still alive, is a woman named Bridget Riley. She um, did a lot of paintings of op art paintings where they you look at them and they actually do seem to just move and kind of pop out of the canvas at you. It requires a little more like planning and um, you know um, figuring it out, but it's a fun movement to look into. So I'm just using the patterns to overlap things. Yeah. And kind of maybe turn things around too and see if that changes anything for you. Ooh, I wanted to do a stencil. So when I do a stencil, I like to use molding paste. This is opaque, it's this color. When it dries, it's really stiff. So it will, first of all, it dries quicker, but it also, it doesn't get as messed up. It doesn't squish through the stencil in a messy way because it's a lot stiffer. So I'm going to just mix. Let's see, I will do a stencil right here. And I think I'm just going to use I'll just maybe mix a tiny bit of yellow into the paint. Actually, I got a bunch of blue in it too, so it's going to be more of a green. But it's actually going to be all over the place. So I take a card, a credit card, and this is what I'm going to use for my stencil. And it's probably a little better to do this flat. Just try it like this. And I like to just spread that right on there like frosting. And there you go. There's my stencil. And it kind of is sticking out off of the canvas. So there's some relief to it when you use this molding paste. It gives it a little more structure. So I really like using the molding paste for stencils. I'm going to try another one over here. Ooh. This one's going to be a little funkier. Kind of cool. So yeah, stencils are really fun for getting a pattern that you can reproduce over and over. This has been really educational. I really appreciate it. I love your painting. Thanks, Amanda. It's so sweet of you. Okay, yeah, that got a little messy right there. You know, if ever anything's messy, wet your paper towel and just wipe it off. You know, as long as it's still wet. Actually, this is kind of neat. This drip was still wet, so now as I'm wiping it off, it's all coming off. Yeah, if you ever need to just, you know, start over, just wipe it off. Or you can also, if your paint has dried too much, you can use a piece of sandpaper, um, sand stuff down and paint over it. Um, I'm going to take a piece. If you have paper with a pattern on it, it's really fun to use that. And I love, especially like, I mean, my friend gave me this, and this is how the piece of paper is. I love when you have these like straight lines in contrast with these more organic forms. So you might take a piece of your pattern paper and apply that. Another thing I like to do is cut forms from just solid blocks of paper. These are just really fun. This paper is really awesome. It's really thin. It's origami paper. And I could cut some shapes, repeating shapes out of this and apply that as well. This painting back here is made with paint sample chips in that way. So that form, that kind of like ghost form, is something I really like to do a lot in my paintings. Another fun thing you can do is like cut the paper or fold your paper in half and then cut out some kind of a design on the crease of it. Some repetition of shape, movement, line, motif, anything like that. What's the difference between molding paste and modeling paste? You know, I don't know. That's a good question. I tend to see them as interchangeable. I'd have to look it up, but this is molding paste. I may have said modeling paste. I'm not even sure, but honestly, I don't think there's much of a difference. Or even if there is a difference, they seem very similar to me. But I mean, I'm sure there's some subtle difference, like maybe one of them is a little bit softer than the other, like one is more rigid than the other. Maybe like that's, the only thing I can think of. I feel like this orange is too intense and I'm not sure if I want to put it in, but just so you know, you can be cutting patterns out of your paper also and applying that. So when you apply something, when you apply paper to your canvas, if you have wet paint, I'm actually gonna let's see. I kind of like this neutrally color. So if you have wet paint, you can use that as an adhesive. So I'm going to just kind of smooth that out. And I'm going to lay this right into it, this paper. So yeah, any kind of wet acrylic paint, if it's thick enough, you can use as an adhesive. You can also use your gel medium, acrylic gel medium. It's a little bit thicker, and that works really well as an adhesive. You might have sketches of, other paintings you've done that you could cut up and apply into your painting also. So you might keep this totally abstract like this, or maybe incorporate an element of something, like a still life or a portrait or something. You could use this as a background or just a jumping off point for something else. I kind of like the way that square is so imposed on this. So I'm going to go ahead and put another one here. And you could also just tack it on like that so it's more of a temporary thing until you commit to it. But I like seeing these opaque color blocks kind of imposed on top of these other things. I mean, I really like it. Okay, it's starting to wrinkle up a little bit though. What, any other questions? I'm happy to answer. Yeah, this is just like a nice, you can always just keep working on top of this. Another fun thing to do is if you have any like drips or like things that are kind of mushy, you could outline them. Like I have this little section here. I'm going to go ahead and outline. And I'm using my dark color. And maybe from here, this shape, I could do like little, I don't know, little curves or something in it. Sort of weird. Not sure if I like that, but yeah, that could be a jumping off point, is to just outline a drip or a mark. Or the edge of a color block or something. You can also use pattern as a way to integrate some things together. Like I said, to stitch things together. In the video description, I've also included a link to the artist Yaya Kusama, because she did her infinity net of dots, polka dots, tons and tons and tons of polka dots. And she's a good one to know when we're talking about patterns. So yeah, you can check the video description for links. And if you like these videos and you feel like you get something out of them and you want to see more of this, feel free to donate. I have some links in the video description that you can donate to. I have my PayPal and Venmo. It's appreciated. So for me, a lot of times it's like I like something and not everything. So I might paint things out or tear things up or, like I said, sand things out and just use that as a base for something else. The piece behind you, this one here, that's how I did that. Like there's probably 3 or 4 layers of paintings underneath that that I just kept building on top of. That tends to be my way of working often. So I think I'm going to just stop there. If there's any questions, let me know. Otherwise, we will do this again next Monday. Not sure yet what we're going to do. I'll see. Hello, here the whole time. I had a blast. Fun, fun, fun. Stitching is therapeutic. Yes. Repetitive marks, patterns, absolutely. It's very therapeutic. I agree. Thanks for joining, Lisa. All right. Well, I'm going to log out of here. Thank you, Ursula. This was great. Oh, thanks, Jen. Hey, Jamie. Thank you. Y'all are awesome. I love you. Can't wait to hang out again. Uh, and all right, I'm going to log out. Bye. Thanks. Thanks, Amanda. Thanks, Walker. Bye.